Hey everyone, Tony D with another webcomic profile, and Little Jones in the other room. So we're going to talk about today the Anti-War Comic, the very controversial comic on the Webcomic Factory site. So smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Please check out the Webcomic Factory at thewebcomicfactory.com and my books. You can see them links in the on the Webcomic Factory page here. You got the Pineys, and you got Wokistan. It goes right to the links. Okay, so let's get into it. The Webcomic Factory. I'm a pretty political guy, and we've been doing the anti-war comic for quite a while. If you go into the archive here, and by the way, the archive on the Webcomic Factory, you see the logo here, and then across the top it has the various things, and then one of them's the archive, and you can see the archives for literally every comic that's been on the site, just about. But if you go to that and click on archive, you can get to the anti-war comic archive, and it has links to everything. It has links to the artist and to I couldn't link every single comic. I tried to initially when I started building the archive, manually, just highlighting a thing and dropping the link. It was actually too much for the website. There's too many comics, so we're looking at, there was some space in between artists, and initially we didn't start until the September of 2011. Although that was one of the early comics me and Christian were toying with, and I think Christian may have written one or two, or or she at least pitched some. But we I wanted to do this even though I kind of knew I would catch some flack for it. It's hard to do political stuff, as I've said before, but I think if you're consistent, and I think if you just do it, and I think for something like an anti-war stance, you're usually pretty okay. It's a little different when you take a stance on other things, but most 99% of people, even people who kind of support wars for a time, they're generally anti-war. It's generally anti-war. There are some anti-war, tropes that get a bad rap. They say, "Oh, you hate America," or "Oh, you hate the troops." But I think a lot of that's been, undone, especially in the past, say, 10 years or so. Certainly during 9/11 and the fallout right after, there was a lot of stuff going on with that. So we're talking, let's see, we started in 2011. By that time, it was mostly over. Obama is in office by that time. But, there was still a little bit of that. But, prior to that, I would go to anti-war protests. I went to the local one. And, you would have people pull up and scream at you, just scream obscenities at you, and then take off in their car. And you'd be worried that they'd be coming back to run you over. You really were. Supporting Ralph Nader in his bid for president, I collected signatures for him because he was very anti-war. And that was during the Kerry Bush election, when Bush was running for re-election. And I actually did a comic about it where, and this was true, I was, the organizers said, go to Fahrenheit 9/11 and stand outside. It's a good place to get people to sign up. So I did. And, I had a guy, he must have had a breakdown or something. He started screaming at me, like, not just shouting at me, like screaming, like uncontrollably at me, that I was re-electing George W. Bush, and he was livid, like eyes bugging out of his head, livid. And he, this was a man, and he screamed so loud his voice like cracked and everything. And then when he walked away, And I didn't really respond to him much. I just said, look, I'm trying to get Ralph Nader on the ballot for New Jersey, and he just saw it as, well, that's going to draw votes away from Kerry, and that could to him that was the worst thing in the world. And then he got into his car and drove very fast past where the area I was standing in, and I got a little scared, but he didn't do anything other than that. And I collected some signatures, and Ralph got on the ballot. Not that it made much of a difference in New Jersey. So if you know anything about New Jersey, it's a pretty blue state. But anyhow, that's one of the comics. But the first comic and the first artist was Roberto Cotto Brenesio. I cannot say some of these names. I apologize, Roberto. I don't talk to a lot of the artists on the phone. Roberto's from Mexico, and he had a pretty funky style, I thought, very different. And and this first one, this was based on a true story too. I went to this party in New York after 9/11, and two guys out of nowhere just started, they were actually comic book fans and they basically, I was talking to some hot girl. Oh, she was so cute. And trying to make some time with her, and they heard I did comics, and they totally interrupted me, which sucked. And I was already mad at them. But then they said they did a radio show, and I thought, oh, this will be good. At least I can get on their show and be a guest. And at some point, we got to talking about 9/11, and I don't know why, but I really stepped in it. And they got so mad that I had an anti-war stance and my political views. We started arguing. And then, like, the whole conversation turned kind of, not ugly, but it was very uncomfortable. And then an older guy who was at the party, who's in the comic here, he was a Korean War veteran. And he just waded into the argument and chastised me too, Again, it was one of these ideas that everybody who's anti-war, you hate the troops and you hate America, and nothing could be further from the truth. If anything, you support the troops because you don't want to put them in harm's way, on these overseas wars. I mean, the Korean War really was the first. Well, I shouldn't say it was the first, but one of the first wars in the modern age that wasn't really a war, and we really shouldn't have been there. And what good has it done? You can argue that, well, now we have South Korea, and you wouldn't have South Korea. Yeah, well, South Korea was run by a despot up until 1987. So, these are not small things to do to transform a country. And you also have to understand, too, that if we had not gotten involved, there would have been more country for the communists to control, which meant that the Soviet Union would have had to stretch their resources even further, and same thing with the North Koreans. So you could be looking at the opposite. You could be looking at a situation where the Soviet Union collapsed sooner, and the entire peninsula could be democratic by now, that the entire peninsula would have collapsed economically and governmentally. So anyhow, I'm rambling. I'm rambling about politics, which, see, that's how I get sucked into this conversation in the comic. But so that was the first one, and Roberto also drew the one. This is the most viewed comic on the Webcomic Factory, and this was a response to Frank Miller. And Frank Miller, he kind of, he stepped into it too. He started doing some big political argument. I think this was right around the time he was pushing that comic, which originally was going to be Batman versus ISIS kind of comic, but he changed the name of it and self-published it. So, because it got picked up by a magazine in LA and relinked, I got like almost 100,000 hits on this. This was about 95,000 hits, and I'm sure it's over 100,000 now. So great traffic on the hit. It still has the link to Miller's. Oh, it's all gone by now. Miller had some post online, which was that initiated the whole thing. I'm sure he'd rather forget about old internet flame wars. And then going into 2012, we had the first appearance of Beard Guy, a guy I call Beard Guy, and he is just a guy I argue with at a coffee shop. And so it just gives me an opportunity to talk about things. And the nice thing about it is it allowed me to reuse. This was one of the ones I reused the panels a lot on. So this was like the first version of that. It kind of depended upon the issue at the time, what side. Beard Guy was usually the wrong side, or as many of my detractors call him, Straw Man, which is a weird way to put it because, really, you say things in comics and, the opposite of straw man would be like, well, okay, instead of a straw man, it would be somebody else's voice, like arguing against you and making points, but you can't really have that in a comic. I wrote the comic, so it's just ridiculous to say, oh, you put up a straw man. Look, it's a device used to talk about stuff. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the comic. But I don't know, people get so bent out of shape. This one here this one was about the election in Mexico at the time, and we also translated a Spanish version of it. So that was the one time we did that, and that was kind of cool, getting the Spanish fans in. It was not something we could do on a regular basis because it was a lot. I didn't want to use like Google Translate. I actually got someone to help me do that, or I think Roberto did. Maybe Roberto did it. I don't remember. So long ago. This is 2012, so it was like 8 years ago. And then the first color strip. This is the first color strip Roberto did, which I thought was pretty cool. Had a lot of good colors, although it was kind of a sad strip. And so it was a big year, all kinds of crazy stuff going on during that first full year with Roberto, 2012, and a lot of stuff going on. And the archive is pretty much divvied up by major milestones and just sort of months. So as we got into 2013, we continued doing stuff. This is this panel. I don't know if you can see it. It's a parody of the Doctor Strangelove, the scene from Doctor Strangelove, if you remember that. Let me just check, make sure you can see all the comics. Yeah. So Doctor Strangelove, me riding a missile there. So we got to do fun stuff like that. Then in 2014, we eventually went back to black and white. It was a little much to do. You can see some of the panels being reused by this point. Again, it was a lot easier to reuse panels for this kind of stuff, and so we did. Then, oops, did I lose the archive? I did. The heck happened? I accidentally closed it. Okay. This was comic strip 100, and so that was a big deal. And this is another one where I used a lot of old panels from previous strips. And then shortly thereafter, that was September, Roberto moved on to other things. He was doing other comics, and Horatio drew the comic for a while, and he had a very detailed style as well, and even had what I could describe as watercolor sort of look to some of his shading here. And so he worked on a comic that was a Edward Snowden strip, I believe. And here's one about waterboarding and torture, which we did a bunch on that. I think this was about the Chicago PD's little gitmo that they had built. Quite disgraceful. So let's see. So Roberto was around for about 100 strips, maybe 100 and like 10, something like that. And then Horatio was on for about plus, a year plus, I would say. Um, yeah, let's see. There's an October strip. This is also Horatio, 2015. And then Gwydion, Gwydion Vibart, who's the current artist, started back in 2016. And you can see his work here. This was the first strip he did. Kind of cool. And Gwydion's been doing it ever since. And we've gotten a pretty good rhythm. Oh, this was a good one. This was Unit 731. Oh, my goodness. This was one of the strips. This one just horrified me. It really did. This is about some of the atrocities committed by Imperial Japan during World War II, which a lot of people don't really know about. I certainly didn't know a lot about this. You know, they experimented on people because, you know, part of the Imperial Japanese, they didn't consider, you know, they didn't want anybody to be taken prisoner on either side. They didn't, you know, they told their soldiers, don't be taken prisoner. You know, you get taken prisoner, don't come back. It was a disgrace. So, you know, a lot of the Japanese would fight to the death. And then here you got, you know, the people they captured, they did not treat them humanely at all. Now, some of the Americans, they treated better, but not great. Well, there's rumors that some of the Americans were even in this too. But, you know, a lot of these were, and this is why China and Japan do not get along. They still remember World War II. They did horrific things to Chinese prisoners in that. And it really is disturbing if you ever read about it. You know, just doing that comic was, that really stuck with me. And this was 2019. This was getting into the Russia Gate thing and media. You know, it's harder to do the anti-war comic with Trump in office because he has tried to keep us out of some of these areas. You know, he seems to be an anti-war guy, not really trying to start too much trouble. You know, it was easier with Obama in office, and this was like last week's. This is a couple who appear in the strip often. They're just arguing over stuff. Yeah, I mean, now, you know, when Obama bombed Libya, that was a real easy comic to make because, you know, it was pretty big. You know, it was NATO bombing another country. It was totally against international law and wrong, and it's pretty cut and dry. You know, when Trump bombed the Syrians, which I was against, it was a little more complicated because, like, Trump warned the Syrians, and then it was almost like a staged event where he, like, bombed the place but told everybody ahead of time, and it was almost like, well, I'm gonna have to bomb you, but, like, get all your guys out of there. So it was very weird. Very Trump's really hard to pin down, but I find myself doing more media related pieces during the Trump administration because the war is now more of a war of words, which I prefer. I mean, at least nobody's dying. So this is a strip we've been doing for a while. It's called Left World, Right World, which I actually made out of a previous strip with newscasters, and it's just about, you know, news stories, how the left cover them and how the right cover them. And, you know, just like all the strips on the anti-war comic, it angers people. If you ever want to see the most negative comics, negative comments ever, visit the Webcomic Factory on Imgur and read their comments on the anti-war comic. They go out of their minds over there. I think that's partly because I think a lot of the internet in general, especially on social media, tends to be younger people, tends to be high schoolers and college students, and they're just grossly uninformed. You know, they feel like, you know, a lot of people on the internet, they're young and they just cast judgments on everything. It's not just politics. It's like movies, TV show, you do a piece of art. you know, you've got these a-holes that will happily come in and go, oh, that's a piece of crap. I don't know why you drew that, kind of thing. Or, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it's just Twitter's probably the worst. Twitter is probably the worst, you know. But you have to, I try to, for the most part, stay above the fray. I like to get in political discussions once in a while, but, you know, I try not to make it personal. If the other person gets personal, well, you know, then you try to just sort of back out of the conversation, or you just ignore them. I mean, that's what I've done in a lot of cases. I just ignore the person. Um, but, you know, people love to make snarky comments on the internet. So, and look, I'm not asking you to agree with me. If you want to come to the site and discuss things politely, I'm all for it. If you want to come and just call me a jerk, you know, I don't know why you would waste your time. Like, I mean, there's plenty of people I disagree with on the internet, but I wouldn't bother to waste my time insulting them. It's just, you know, it's just stupid. You know, unless you can feel you can get hits out of it or laughs, you know, I don't know why you do it. You know, sometimes I do stuff for hits just to, you know, jack up my hits or whatever. But, you know, I'm not lying. I try not to lie. This is just my opinion. And so, you know, but again, it's politics. You know, you have to sort of take people's reactions with a grain of salt. They get very upset, and people get very emotional about their politics sometimes. So, you know, eventually they cool down and they just go their merry way. So if you ever wade into this, understand what you're getting into. You're going to get a lot of flack either way, no matter what side of the debate you're on. Even if you're on the good side or bad side, there really is no good side or bad side in the world of politics. You know, there's different views, and they can be as subtly nuanced as you want, but there's always going to be a guy who goes, "You're wrong. You're so wrong, and you're so stupid." So you got to have thick skin in this game. But anyhow, if you enjoy talking about politics like I do, come on by the Webcomic Factory and check out the Antiwar Comic posted today on Saturdays right now by me and Gwydion Vibart.